Psychology is a course that has gone under some revisions in recent times, and it's going to continue to go under some revisions, because what happened with psychology is that the field, especially in the last couple of decades, has gotten some really exciting research done. Things like the advent of the fMRI, or functional MRI machine, to be able to show us where exactly in our brains is responsible for different thoughts and different actions, has really contributed a lot to the field of psychology. And so when we think about what we have learned in the field of psychology in just the last couple of decades, because AP Psychology has been around for a very long time, the amount of information that students are expected to know and understand and memorize is really getting huge. And at a certain point, what they did was, if you look at the Myers book, there's about 14 different chapters in it, or units. And that is how the AP Psychology exam used to be organized. 14 different units. Now, about 2 or 3 years ago, they went through and they condensed and they kind of rearranged and changed and added some things together. And they made it 9 units instead of just 14. I will also upload a guide that shows the difference between the 14-unit Myers book that you have seen and the new 9 units. So when we go through and we look in my AP and AP Classroom, you may be looking back at the Myers textbook and saying, wait, where is this chapter? And some of the chapters are paired together, and they jump around a little bit, and it's reorganized. And later Myers editions are trying to keep up and reorganize and recategorize things like that. But the one we've got, it'll be okay as long as we know what chapter we're reading together. Same thing with Barron's. Some of the older Barron's books, things will get paired together and a little out of order. Because what we want to find, what we want to follow is the psychology in course in my AP and AP Classroom. Because what happened a couple of years ago with the pandemic is that when people went out of order towards the end of the year, when everything got shut down in 2020, they deleted from the AP exam certain chapters that were quote unquote at the end, especially things that people like to go through first, things like social psychology and abnormal psychology, or mental illness and treatment. And so what happened is that a lot of people, when they went out of order, so we really want to go in order, which may not follow the other resources, but we're going to default to AP. And here's the other frustrating thing about the AP exam. So the AP exam format, when you take it in May, it is 2 hours long. So it's one of the shortest AP exams that is out there. Some AP exams are 3 or even 4 hours long. Ours is only 2. So that's really good. The first part of it is 100 multiple choice questions. That is going to be 2/3 of your exam score. So 2/3 of your exam score is going to be how well you do on those 100 multiple choice questions. And then there's going to be 2 what we call FRQs, or free response questions. That is going to be the other 1/3 of your score. So those 2 free response questions are going to, we know that one is absolutely going to be research methods. So that's why research methods, which is one of the first chapters we do, is the most important chapter, because if you really master research methods, we know that you have one half of that FRQ just down. And a lot of times those are some easy points. Most of the time when we talk about the FRQs for AP Psychology, they are 7 points each. And I will show you when we start to practice FRQs the way that they are formatted. Generally, there are bullet points, and each bullet point there, you can easily identify about 7 bullet points. Now, if you can only find about 6, sometimes that's okay. They may only have 6, sometimes it's 8, but most of the time they're sticking to that 7-point formula. When we talk, so the first one is always going to be, or the second one of the FRQ questions is always going to be research methods. The other one is going to be a mixture of different concepts from the entirety of the course. So any kind of vocabulary. One of the things that is frustrating about AP Psychology for many students is that sometimes a term or a concept may have more than one word that it goes by. And you may know a concept by one way, and they're wording it a different way. And it can kind of throw students off their scent. Generally, what I say is that we need to look at the words and see if it sounds like any concept that you know or understand. There may be a concept that you're like, wait a second, that kind of sounds like this concept. I would encourage students to make an educated guess in that way and have them really just try and answer that question if it is the term that they think they know. Because when the people are writing the AP exam, so the writers of the questions, they are using about a dozen different sources, not just the Myers textbook, but many other textbooks by many other authors when they are using these things to try and write the questions. So there may be terms and there will be terms that you've never seen before, and that's okay. You don't need a perfect score to get a 5. That is going to be something that, maybe one student does in the entire country, and it may just be luck, or into the entire world, and it may just be luck. So when we talk about the exam, is that you're going to do your best and you're going to memorize and understand as many concepts as possible. But sometimes you're just going to see something on the AP Psychology exam that you've never seen before. And I don't want my students to get upset or let that throw them. You're just going to answer that question and move on. I grade the, when we talk about when the AP exam is submitted and we have those free response questions, they have to be graded by educators all over the world to make sure that we're looking at our students' grade. The students are getting the points fairly. It's not done by computer, it's done by people. We all get together in a giant, convention center, and we grade them. I'm one of the people who grades them. So I see all different kinds of students who are trying their best, or maybe they know the concept, or maybe they don't, and it's okay. These students are still getting great grades. They're still getting terrific scores. They're still getting those 5s and 4s, and they are. So I have been grading the AP exam with College Board for a couple of years now as well. We do that every summer in June when we get in all the AP exams. We go through mountains and mountains, thousands and thousands of exams. Each person grades probably about 1,000 exams themselves through multiple questions, because there often are different FRQs that, say, students on the East Coast would get versus students on the West Coast versus students all around the world might get a different exam question, so that social media doesn't get a hold of it and people get tipped off unfairly. So when it says this is where you're going to start typing in all the different people that come across. Now, I'll give you the answers for the first couple. The structuralism and functionalism, there's only 1 or 2 people that are here. However, when you talk about behaviorism, we're going to talk about some people today, but when we get to the learning chapter, you're going to add some more people in here, because they're going to be more contributors that we learn about later. And then this, really the key to psychology is putting things in your own words. And so what I really want you to do is, what did it say about human thoughts and behaviors? Is I want you to put in your own words how you can explain the theory. Then we need to know about positives or strengths of the theory, and negatives or limitations. So the pros and cons of the theory. And so that is something that you're going to work on as you not only read the Myers book and other resources, but also the AP classroom videos and from my lecture notes. And then the second page is some more that we're going as it. But in 1879, this dude, his name was Wilhelm Bunt. He began to study the relationship between people's thoughts and their behavior in his lab in Germany. He is the father of psychology science. He is trying very, very hard. He is a little bit jealous. All of his friends during that time period in science are learning awesome some things about the body. They're doing autopsies, they're doing surgery, they are learning about how the heart, which is what we used to think controlled our behavior, is pumping blood. They are seeing things happening in real time. But Wilhelm, he's a little bit jealous. He says, I really don't understand how our thoughts are happening. If somebody breaks a bone, we can cut them open and see that broken bone. We can see how it causes people to not be able to walk because then it doesn't support you. We can see a heart beating if we cut open a patient and do surgery. We can see lungs breathing and taking in air, but he couldn't see thoughts. And so therefore he was a little bit frustrated. He's like, how do I get to see thoughts? How do I know this? How do I learn this? How do I learn more about it? He trains subjects, though, in introspection. This is his lab. He's going to be as sciencey as he can in terms of psychology. And people are reporting how they feel about certain stimuli. So certain things he would present them. He's like, hey, here's a kitten. How do you feel about this kitten? And then they would use their words to describe how they felt about a kitten. But here's the problem. How do you guys feel about a kitten? Anybody want to tell me their thoughts on a kitten?
Like cute.
Okay, so Chloe says cute. Caitlin, what do we got? How do you feel about a kitten?
I'm allergic to them.
You're allergic to them, so sneezy might be a word. Oof, sneezy. Sneezy, cute. All right. Donald, how do you feel about a kitten?
I don't know. I don't really have a particular feeling towards, or like a particular opinion, I guess.
Awesome. That's correct.
They exist.
They exist. See, all of this is correct. So poor Wilhelm, he's trying so hard. He doesn't know where to start. It's a brand new science. And he may get information like they're cute, or I'm allergic, they make me feel sneezy, or I don't really have any thoughts. They kind of just occur to me, like they don't really occur to me. And so that's the problem with poor Wilhelm and his studies, is he's getting all these answers and it's not really leading to a bunch of scientific discoveries. He called his theory structuralism. He sought to identify and understand the structures of the brain. So if you've ever seen those old-fashioned weird pictures where it shows like a human head and it's like, this is your sense of smell, and this is your sense of, your thoughts about your mother, and all of that weird kind of stuff, that came from Wilhelm's structuralism. He thought that every part of the brain did a specific different task, and he was going to figure out which one. He didn't have a whole lot to do. And this belief really persevered for a very long time in psychology, thinking that certain parts of our brain controlled very specific actions or thoughts or memories. And what we've learned now is that, well, that may be sometimes true. It's much more complicated than we ever thought before. For example, things like memories are stored in all different places in our brain, mainly our frontal lobes, but in all different places in our brain. And injuring or having an illness like a tumor or some other kind of lesion, which we'll talk about when we get to the next chapter, somewhere in our brain really does not, cannot guarantee that we're going to destroy one specific task or one specific memory or something like that. We don't always know until it happens. And sometimes the brain can heal itself, and we'll just have to get into that later. So another dude, another William James, was over in the United States, and he was coming a little bit after Wilhelm Bunt. He is saying, look, it doesn't matter which part of the brain does what. He says it's about why. Why does our brain function? Why is our brain doing these certain things? And he said he doesn't really care about that structuralism very much. He cares about functionalism. What function do our thoughts and behaviors serve? So he is explaining, kind of not so much what you felt when you saw the kitten, but why, what purpose or did your feelings? So if you said sneezy, it's maybe because we need to stay away from the kitten because it'll cause us sneezing problems or allergy problems, or worse, even asthma attacks. What purpose does it serve? And the frustrating thing about structuralism and functionalism for students is that they're like, I don't get it. I don't understand. What are they really saying about this? And what is, frustrating is that at the beginning, they're just trying to learn, and they're just trying to formulate their theories. And when we sum up their theories in, say, just a sentence or two, when we think about that, we're like, isn't there more? And at that time, there wasn't. So we have to give them credit for at least trying and for attempting to, start in the field. At the same time, around this structuralism, functionalism, there's a dude named Max Wertheimer and other Gestalt psychologists. And they're, again, over in Germany, they're emphasizing that the entirety of the person has to be understood through the entirety of their experiences. Gestalt means pieces and whole. So it actually means the whole. It is not just the difficulty that, say, a client or a patient or a person who's struggling experiences, but the context in which the difficulty occurs. So one thing to one person may be much easier than something else that another person is struggling with. And so if the same thing, let's say, we lose our lunch money. So one student may lose their lunch money, and because they've got other coping skills or other support going on in their life, that's okay. It doesn't really destroy their day. But another student may lose their lunch money, and it destroys not only their day, but their week. Maybe it's hard to get food. Maybe it sets off a chain reaction of events. Maybe skipping a meal because they can't, they don't have friends to share their lunch with or something like that really destroys a big part of their day. So Gestalt psychology is really caring about the sum of the experiences. And again, the problem with these is that it's subjective. What does a kitten feel like? Well, or what is a kitten? How do we experience a kitten? Everybody has a different answer. So that is some of the real struggles here. This is something like the objective reality is a tree, but the subjective interpretation may be that the tree means different things to different people. This is another little cartoon, a student saying it may be wrong, but it's how I feel. Maybe we feel that the kitten is cute, or maybe they just don't occur to us, that kind of problem. Now, who here has heard of Freud? Anybody? Nobody? Okay, we got Chloe's heard of Freud, Donald's heard of Freud. All right. So Freud is very popular, and you probably still use some of his terms in your everyday life. Have we ever wondered what our dreams mean? Or have we ever heard somebody say, what did this dream mean? Nobody's ever cared what dreams meant? Okay, Caitlin's cared what dreams meant. So that comes from Freud. Sigmund Freud, he's a dude, he's over in Austria, and he is late 1800s, early 1900s. Again, psychology is a new science. So Freud is coming up with a bunch of wacky ideas. He believes that there's this part of our mind, and we'll learn more about this in later chapters. He believes that this part of our mind called the unconscious, and the unconscious has all of these forces that are mainly motivated by two things. And the two things are sex and aggression. And he says, look, we are totally motivated by, this part of ourselves, and we'll learn about it more later, called the id. And the id is this part of our brains that we don't even know about. We're not even aware about it. And it's making us do all of these wacky things. It's making us act out in ways that are inappropriate. And basically, if you've ever seen a cartoon when you were younger and there was like a little angel and a little devil on your shoulder, if anybody's ever seen that kind of comes from Freud. He says that this little angel and the little devil is the id, and the angel is called our superego. He said that they're constantly warring inside of ourselves, and it is our ego's job to kind of decide, when are we going to give in? Are we going to give in to the little devil and do the bad thing, or be mean to somebody sometimes, or act out, or get what we want? Or are are we going to kind of be the angelic side and be really perfect? But sometimes it's super hard to be perfect, right? It's super hard to study all the time, even though we know we should. And so are we going to give in? Are we going to always eat our vegetables, or are we going to eat candy and potato chips? And you don't even know you want the candy and potato chips because it's this id that's deep inside of you that is controlling your behavior. That's what Freud said. He says that, look, our conscious has little to no control. We are just a victim. If you eat the candy and the potato chips, it's just your id acting out. Well, his theories were very unscientific. He based them off of things called case studies, which we'll talk about later. And they're unverified, but things that we use today, like dream interpretation. He wrote a whole book on dreams and what they meant and the symbols. And we know now that none of that is true. But we still, lots of people still go, oh, what did that dream mean? And that's from Freud. If you ever say things like repression or, oh, you're so defensive. If anybody's ever told you you're so defensive, that is stuff coming from Freud. Again, we'll talk later in a chapter called Personality about how he believes that defense mechanisms are a way that we are acting out in order to kind of protect ourselves. Also, if anybody's ever seen a therapist or anything like that, not seen, like, I mean, like in a TV show and pop culture or anything like that, if anybody's ever seen somebody lying down on a couch, that is completely from Freud. Freud would have his clients lie down on a couch facing away from him. He would actually sit behind them so that they wouldn't be influenced if his facial expressions were kind of a little bit off, or maybe he had a judgy face. He made sure that his patients, as he called them, did not see his facial reactions to whatever they were saying. Freud is also big on parental influence. He believes that parents have the ability just totally to mess up their children. So if anybody has ever blamed anything they've ever done on what their parents did when you were younger, that is also coming out of some Freud beliefs. This is a little thing, a little cartoon from Freud, and saying that your mother is the reason why you will struggle with romantic relationships for the rest of your life. He really believes that parents have a lot of power. All right, so after Freud, because Freud is really just, oh man, you gotta love him, but he's kind of making stuff up as he goes along. We have, and he worked with a lot of people, because what happened with Freud is that he was a very intelligent person. He was a neurologist. And if we think about neurologists, those are doctors that know a lot. But what happened was he was seeing people with unexplained symptoms. And he really tried to do that, to have explanations. But the little devil and little angel on our shoulder isn't totally explaining why somebody would have what they used to call something called hysterical blindness, which is just unexplained blindness without a physical cause. Now, when we talk about the next school of thought, so that is Freud, it's psychoanalysis, and some people that kind of said he was wrong, we will talk about later. So if you see in the chart where it says psychodynamic theory, those are the people that came after Freud. They are his students and people that are kind of saying he's wrong and adapting his theories long after he's gone. He dies in the 1940s after escaping to England to escape World War II and what was going on in Austria and Germany. So we have some new people. We have some people that are over in the United States, and their names are Skinner and Watson. The next school of thought says, look, it doesn't matter all of this weird stuff that you can't see, because nobody can see the devil and angel on our shoulder unless we're in a cartoon, and that's not reality. The next thing is, hey, what can we see? We can see how behavior. So when we are talking about Skinner and Watson, they are studying animals. They are studying animals and applying those principles to humans. So Skinner and Watson are like, hey, what can I see? What behavior can I see? And how can I influence that behavior? How can I change somebody's behavior? So we have Skinner and we have Watson. Watson comes first, and Watson is saying, look, sometimes you can learn to predict events. That's what he's saying. And so he does this experiment. Watson. Oh man, Watson is mean to babies. Watson and the little Albert experiment. Let me explain this. So Watson is, he gives this baby, he thinks that he can make babies or make people afraid of things that they weren't afraid of before. So he gives this baby, there's a baby in his experiment, and the baby is called Little Albert. We don't really know what happened to Little Albert. If you want to look it up, there's lots of theories about whether or not he died pretty early in life, or he grew up to, be afraid or things like that. So he has a little baby, and his name is Little Albert. And he gives Little Albert a white rat, this beautiful white rat. And do we like rats? Do we hate rats? Who likes rats? Yeah. But a baby is like, oh man, this white rat is awesome. He's like, this rat is fuzzy. This rat is soft when it wrinkles its nose and its little whiskers tickle the baby. The baby's super excited and delighted to have this white rat to play with. It's just a gentle little white rat, baby-sized rat. So Watson is mean. Watson sneaks up behind Little Albert. And he's very, very quiet. And while Little Albert's just playing with this little white rat, having the time of his life. And what happens is Watson sneaks up behind him, and he takes like a pot, like a cooking pot, and a loud metal and a metal thing. And he goes bang, and it scares the baby. What do we think happens when we scare a baby? Anybody know? What happens when we scare a baby?
They cry.
Yes, the baby cried, right? And so Watson's assistant takes away the white rat. A few minutes later, we call him the baby down. We put that white rat back in Little Albert's lap, and Little Albert is again delighted. His white rat friend is back. And Watson's mean again. He sneaks up behind Little Albert, and he goes bang again. What do we think happens? Baby cries. Yes.
Cries again.
So, yes, thank you. So baby cries. So Watson keeps doing this to Little Albert, to the point where basically the next time that we bring in the white rat, Little Albert now just starts crying at the sight of the rat. And he is the thing that he used to love, now he hates, because he has learned to associate that when the white rat appears, the loud noise also happens. And Watson is going to call this theory classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is when we learn to associate two events close together in time. And when we get to the learning chapter, we'll do a whole chapter about this. Yes, Caitlin.
Is that similar to the Pavlov experiment?
Caitlin, you have your hand up. I didn't know if you wanted to speak.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So Pavlov is another dude, and we'll learn about him later. And if we've ever heard of Pavlov, or we've ever heard a Pavlov joke, Pavlov is doing this, but with dogs. And he is, oh man, he's not being nice to those dogs either. We think he's being nice. He's actually starving his dogs. He's keeping them purposefully underweight. Pavlov is bringing a bowl of food. And what do? A dog's really hungry, and we bring a bowl of food to a dog. What might the dog do? What physical reaction might the dog have?
Just gonna go eat.
Yeah, right before he eats, though, we're holding that treat or that delicious bowl of food, and that dog's like, what might that dog do? That happens here.
Drool.
Yes, the dog's gonna drool. So what is happening in Pavlov's experiment is he is bringing food to these hungry dogs, and when he's doing it, he is, Caitlin, do you know what he does?
Ringing a bell?
He's ringing a bell. He's making some kind of noise, but he's ringing a bell. He does different noises, but yeah, to see if it's different things. But yeah, he's ringing a bell every time the food happens. What do you think the dog has learned from this?
That every
Whenever
time
the bell is rung.
rings.
Yeah.
Yes, that food happens when the bell rings. And so therefore, when the bell rings, the dog would have what reaction?
Start salivating.
Exactly. So that's Pavlov. So Pavlov is doing it to dogs, and Watson is doing it to babies. And the last person is Skinner. Skinner is doing something else. He is working with pigeons, like the birds, and he is training pigeons how to peck with their beaks a little disc, a little button, in order to get a reward. And he's trying to figure out not only how fast the pigeon will peck the disc or how many times, but what kind of rewards. So Skinner and Watson are really focusing on observable responses. I can see that pigeon peck the disc. I can see that baby cry. I can see that dog drool. That is what behavioralism cares about. Skinner and Watson are dark dudes, man. They are viewing the world a little bit like that everybody is programmed and nobody has any options, that nobody has